The idea of streaming games Netflix style rather than running them off your own PC or consoles is nothing new. Believe it or not, the idea has been floating around in some form at least for almost 2 decades. But it seems like now in 2018 the conversation has been really pushed forward.
Video game streaming or cloud gaming is a simple idea. You play a game that's streamed to you live over the internet rather than playing it by popping a disc into your own machine or downloading the entire game onto a hard drive. Theoretically, you'd be able to play monstrously demanding AAA games on a humble smartphone or a television without the need for a games console or PC. That's because the game is actually running on a server somewhere hundreds of miles away and the data is just being sent to you. It sounds great.
Sounds great, theoretically.
That word's going to come up a lot in this video. The only limitation is your internet connection, which is where the idea, as it stands currently, pretty much falls flat for quite a lot of people. Slow internet speeds can mean any game streamed from the cloud can look like, well, I mean, it can look like this. It looks like a Windows 98 screensaver, man. And more problematic for a lot of gamers is the idea of input lag, a delay between your push of the button and anything actually happening on screen. That kind of thing is enough to kill an FPS or fighting game experience dead in its tracks.
Current examples of cloud gaming or video game streaming options include PlayStation Now, based on the old Gaikai service, which really helped kickstart cloud gaming in earnest along with its competitor back in the day, OnLive, which has since gone bust. Another option is Nvidia's Geforce Now, which is currently in beta and is designed for PC, Mac and the proprietary Nvidia Shield box. But the idea does actually date back to the year 2000 when a company called G-Cluster demonstrated its tech at E3. Crytek were also dabbling with it at around 2005, but stopped working on it in 2007 to wait until the infrastructure and data cables were up to the job. Fast forward over a decade to June this year, and it emerged that Google had been pouring resources into streaming tech to take on the likes of Xbox and PlayStation. Kotaku's Jason Schreier leaked the news, claiming to have spoken to 5 sources on the subject. Google is reportedly working on some sort of streaming platform, currently codenamed Yeti, and is actively courting developers to make games for it.
This was a big story that Kotaku ran with Jason Schreier saying that there was 5 people that were all saying that Google is really taking this seriously and putting loads of resources into, trying to weigh in on the gaming thing with Xbox and PlayStation in its sights. And that's quite a big deal to think that Google would be making the move. The only skepticism is that they've done this kind of thing in the past and they've poured loads of resources into kind of video game related stuff and then they've just kind of left it. So there's a bit of skepticism around it, but if that does pan out, that could be very, very significant. And Google aren't the only ones making moves. According to a new piece on Kotaku recently, writer Keza McDonald says this, quote, "Whenever I've interviewed a games industry executive over the past few months, I've asked them what single thing will revolutionize video games in the next 5 years. One concept kept coming up. Streaming. Whether it was Microsoft's Phil Spencer, Bethesda's Todd Howard, Ubisoft's Igor Mo, or EA's Patrick Soderlund, everyone wanted to talk about the idea of cloud tech-powered and even Netflix-style subscriptions that let you play games on any device." McDonald points out that all of these very senior games industry figures are really into the idea of streaming services for games. Igor Mo is quoted as saying that today we have 200 million players on console and 2 billion gamers in total globally. The games created for those 200 million will soon be accessible to the 2 billion. He's referring to the fact that people won't need a $300 or $400 machine to run their games in future. They can play them on their TVs, smart devices, or any old PC.
So Ubisoft's boss is clearly optimistic, but so is Bethesda's Todd Howard. He told The Guardian that streaming technology is definitely coming and it's going to make people's access to games infinitely easier. Howard points to what's happened with streaming for movies and music, saying the same will definitely happen to gaming. I feel like it's difficult to compare movies and music to the gaming industry, right? Because you don't require that split-second response like you do in the games industry, right? Because you need that input. If there's any input lag at all in games, that you over.
Yeah.
You're not limited by your internet connection.
Just technologically speaking, you're dead right, because it needs to go back the other way. Like, the data needs to come to you and you need to send data back to the server, which you don't have to do with movies and music. You don't have to tell, unless you're talking about skipping tracks or something, or skipping chapters in the movie. What's that? That's nothing. But in gaming, you're constantly pressing buttons, you're constantly moving the analog stick. All that data needs to go back the other way as well as the data that you're getting in. So it's like a whole other factor of complex.
And if they don't realise that that is a barrier for the amount of 2 billion people that eGMO says is going to affect, if they don't realise that all those people won't have the internet structure or infrastructure to be able to deal with those input lags, then they're living on another planet, honestly. Xbox's Phil Spencer is probably the most positive of the lot, according to Keza McDonald, talking up the benefits streaming tech will have on the developers who make the games. Quote, "I want to see the creators that I have relationships with create huge immersive games, and I want to be a platform to allow those creators to reach 2 billion people, and not have to turn their studio into something that makes match 3 games." He reiterates the theme of bringing high quality experiences to every device on the planet. Spencer actually spoke at E3 this year about Microsoft's plans for a game streaming service which could deliver console quality gaming regardless of the platform.
McDonald notes that of all the big boys, Nintendo is the only one keeping quiet on the topic. So the games execs at the top are pretty convinced by this, but the question now is, what about the actual gamers? Well, Nelson Rodriguez of cloud service provider Akamai told VentureBeat this week that unlike VR, for example, there's never going to be a question of whether people actually want to stream games. Quote, "I don't think there's a question about whether customers want it or not. To me, that's different from VR. There's a question about whether the average person wants VR. For cloud gaming, there will never be a question about this. People will always prefer to immediately get what they want. The question is just, can we do it? Will publishers deliver good content at the right price, and will the experience be viable?" And that's really the big question. And I do kind of agree with him. If it is better, it doesn't matter what it is. The basic logic in any industry is, if it's better, if it's a better experience, and it's more media, and it's faster, and it's more straightforward, you just pay a subscription, and you can play whatever you want, wherever you want. If that idea can be executed, then yes, it will take off. The only problem, as we've already kind of discussed multiple times in this video, is can it be done currently because of the way the internet is crap for still a lot of people?
I think it just so many conversations around this one topic, and the one assumption he makes is that the average gamer will want this. Some people don't like subscriptions. Some people like to own the game themselves in physical copy. You know, that's still a preference for a lot of people. And when it comes to removing barriers, as in if the internet infrastructure is there, he's talking about having games when you want, exactly when you want them. Well, if the internet is there, then you can download the whole game and have it on your local hard drive instantly as well. So if the internet is good enough, then that's not a barrier anyway to your games.
Well, another thing that we're talking about that I haven't even mentioned here is the fact that some of these execs seem to think that, kind of like what Microsoft is saying, and it is Microsoft pushing this mainly from what I could see. You know, with the Crackdown and Crackdown 3, and they had this idea of having cloud-driven destruction in the game that you're playing. They talk about that a little bit as well, and there's a bit of a split in this from what I could see, that some of these executives were kind of saying, not just the ones we've named, but there's others in that VentureBeat piece that we've referenced. There's a link in the description. There's people saying, well, hang on a minute, it's not so much about this cloud-powered thing, it's just about accessibility. Whereas other executives are going, no, the games could be amazing. The games could be much bigger than what we can do now. We don't have to make the game for a PlayStation 4. We've got like 19 times the power of a PlayStation 4 in our server farm. We'll use that to make a game instead, which will be more awesome. And you know, so there's this whole idea that the cloud can actually make the games better. That's something that I'm going to need to see to be believed, but it does make sense. If you've got a super powerful PC or a server, of course you should be able to run incredibly realistic games and stuff on it as well.
And there's obviously lots of benefits from the business side of things for them to want us to stream our games. So the barrier for entry for us then is gone, because we don't need hardware, don't need any specific hardware, and subscriptions as well, which, you know, it's guaranteed money every month, isn't it? If we're subscribed to a service, they know exactly how their business is running. They have to wait 2 or 3 years for a gaming development cycle for them to sell you a product if you're paying every single month. So that's, again, a stability for their businesses. I mean, as a gamer, I definitely see the benefits. So you don't have to upgrade your PlayStation 4 to a PlayStation 5, for example. You don't have to buy an update. You know, you can play any game on any laptop, for example, or your mobile phone or something like that.
Take your save with you, like play it at home on the telly, take it with you on the bus, play it on your phone, kind of thing.
That's it. So I again, in theory, it does add a lot of benefits to kind of all parties, but whether we're ready for it, whether we want it, whether they know whether the the internet is going to be good enough to support it, that's another question entirely. And I feel like they're jumping the gun a little bit here. You just got to, I mean, if there's no internet to serve all those billions of people that you're expecting to deliver the service to, it's just not going to happen. So it's just a wait and see, I guess. So where do you stand with this? Are you ready for game streaming? Let us know down in the comments below. Like the video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new around here. Check out another one of our videos on your screen there. Support us on Patreon using that link there. We'll see you again in the next video. Until then, bye for now.